Wilhemina Reed. I've been born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina. I worked for many years at the South Carolina Department of Corrections. Worked there as a supervisor. When I got ill, I had to change up a little bit, and so I came to the point that it was I was going to retire, and I did, and retired with my heart, and then I retired with my leg when I had an issue with my big toe. I did have a wound on my toe, and it wouldn't get well. My the doctor after he checked me, he says he said something's going on with the leg. So after it was a small wound and it never would get well. So I went to a surgeon. It was authorized me to go to this surgeon, and that particular day I got there, and he said, Ms. Reed, he said, I got another doctor I need you to see. And I said, well, what's the matter? I had a doctor with you, and you gonna let me see somebody? He said, yeah, I think this might work. He said, let's try it if you're willing to. I said, okay then. He said, can you see him today? I said, yes, I can see him today.
So I first met Wilhemina probably about 3.5 years ago, and at the time she'd already had a failed bypass graft to the leg that was having problems. And she'd been evaluated at least by 2 different surgeons who provide vascular care in this area, neither of whom felt that there was any option for her to have any kind of revascularization. And she had 2 things really. She had severe pain in her foot, literally almost all the time, and an ulcer on her great toe that was causing her problems with even being able to get up and get around her house. And when I saw her, essentially the question was, could we do a partial amputation of her foot, or would we need to do an amputation more proximally on her? And frankly, the blood flow in her foot was so bad, I didn't think there was any chance she'd even heal a mid-foot amputation. And in fact, I followed her for several weeks, and her toe continued to get worse. And that's usually an indication that there's just such severe disease in the foot that there's no chance she's going to have any kind of salvageable amputation in the foot itself. She was unable to work. She was incredibly unhappy and really unable to get around and do regular things that we take for granted. Just getting up and going to the bathroom was painful for her.
Dr. Claire called me in and said he think he had a program that would work. He said, I'm going to tell you now, this is no guarantee. I don't know where they're going to work because this is new. He said, but we're going to see. I'm going to call you next week after I get all the papers signed up and, ready to go.
An opportunity, I thought, to bring her something that might get her the chance to have a foot that she could walk with and to get her out of pain.
He called me and told me to come in, and I went and he explained the program to me, and the cost of the program was $0, and it was a new program that they found, called lymph flow. And I said, okay. He said, ain't no promises now. I said, okay. He gave me an appointment.
So there are 2 issues in particular about Wilhemina that I thought made her a good candidate for this trial. The first is she was a reliable patient. So she had a regular job that she'd had. She'd been in the community for a long time. She was seeing physicians regularly to try and get this toe resolved and the pain resolved. So, it's important that we have patients who are going to be reliable with their follow-up. And the second was she really did not have any other option for treatment, and she wanted to maintain her ability to walk. And at her age at the time, which was close to 70, the likelihood of her being able to walk with a below-knee prosthesis was very low. And so I thought preserving her foot would be a real benefit for her because it would clearly preserve her ability to walk.
I said, y'all must have a record that's saying, oh, Dr. Claire is a good doctor. Dr. Claire will take care of you. Um, and I said, why everybody say the same thing? And she said, he is good.
We, through an access in a vein in her foot and through an access in an artery in her groin, we were able to connect the blood flow from the top part of one of her calf arteries into the veins of the calf. So basically what we're doing is taking oxygenated arterial flow, and rather than trying to get it all the way into the arteries of the foot, because those arteries don't exist, we're diverting that blood flow into the veins of the foot and trying to circulate the oxygenated blood that needs to get to the foot to preserve it through the venous system of the foot. And that's what we were able to achieve through her posterior tibial artery. So if we look at patients who have critical limb ischemia, they are a group of patients who are critically ill and losing their leg essentially, for the majority of these elderly patients, will trap them in a wheelchair or in bed. And so the goal with limb flow and deep vein arterialization is to try and keep these patients with their own limbs and keep them walking. That, in my view, will alter the way that we approach these patients, because right now, at least 20% of these patients don't have an option for us to save their limbs. But if we can get rid of that no option patient, if we can offer for them the opportunity to have some method of revascularization and preservation of a portion of their foot, that completely alters their course from that point on.
He didn't tell me about all the doctors and the surgeons and that gonna be in the operating room. But anyway, it did, and they went on and did the surgery, and I came back. I was just shocked. It wasn't no pain in my leg. Because everybody kept coming, "Miss Reed, your leg hurt?" I said, "No." "Your leg hurt?" "No." So this guy from student doctor, he came and he stayed with me a lot, asking me questions and talking to me. And then he said, "Miss Reed, you should have seen all the people that was in the operating room." And I said, "In the operating?" He said, "Yeah, it was a gob of people." And he said, "You should have seen." He said, when they saw the blood flowing down my foot, because I wasn't getting no blood in the foot, in my toe, to get well. So he told me, he said, "You should have seen this crowd of people that was in there." I think they were students and doctors and different people. And she said, when that blood came down your leg, he said everybody in there just yelled. I said, "What?" He said, "You should have seen the surprise those people got."
So in general, these patients who have no option really have no named arteries in their foot at all. So their vascular disease has gotten to the point where it's completely destroyed and blocked off all of the arteries that we might be able to bypass to, or to do an angioplasty or stent into in the foot. And the foot, and like all of our tissues, needs oxygenated blood. And the only way really to get that blood flow there in these situations is to take the oxygenated blood from an artery, divert it into the vein, and have those veins serve as a circuit in the foot to deliver oxygenated blood to the tissues. And the limb flow procedure has allowed us to be able to do that. Critical limb ischemia in our country is an increasing problem, and really, in my view, a health crisis at this point. They make up a minority of patients with peripheral vascular disease, but once you get to the point where you have a wound on your foot that can't heal because of a lack of blood flow, or pain in your foot that we can't resolve because of a lack of blood flow, those patients, if we follow them over time, only 50% of those patients will survive out to 2 years. And if you look at just those patients that have no revascularization or no resupply of oxygenated blood flow to their foot, at least a quarter, if not as many as 75% of those patients will wind up with an amputation from 1 to 2 years after presentation. So it's critical in some way that we get oxygenated blood flow back to the feet in these patients in order to preserve their foot, preserve their life, and preserve, honestly, improve their life expectancy. For those patients whom we can't revascularize in one way or another, and they wind up with an amputation, if you look at those patients in particular, only 20 to 25% of those patients will survive a year. So in many ways, many of us as physicians who deal with these patients view amputation as close to a death sentence for these patients. The survival is worse than the survival for someone who's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and we have to change that.
Now I can get around good. I can go where I want to go. The only sometime I might go to the grocery store and pick up a few packages. My it has been a lifesaver. I can walk. For a while I used to walk in sandals, so that toe would be out, and that toe did get well, and I'm fine. I feel fine anyway.
The other thing that's important to understand is if we look at all of the patients who have either an ulcer that can't heal or a wound that can't heal on their foot because of a lack of blood flow or rest pain, of that group, at least 15 to 20% with all of the techniques that we currently have available will not have an option for us to redirect blood flow into the arteries in their foot. So no angioplasty, no stent option, no bypass graft option. These patients have to have some other means of delivering oxygenated blood to their foot, and that's where LymFlow comes in. So at least 20% of patients that we see with this problem are candidates for this opportunity. If we look at patients who have critical limb ischemia, they are a group of patients who are critically ill and losing their leg essentially, for the majority of these elderly patients, will trap them in a wheelchair or in bed. And so the goal with LymFlow and deep vein arterialization is to try and keep these patients with their own limbs and keep them walking. That, in my view, will alter the way that we approach these patients, because right now, at least 20% of these patients don't have an option for us to save their limbs. But if we can get rid of that no option patient, if we can offer for them the opportunity to have some method of revascularization and preservation of a portion of their foot, that completely alters their course from that point on. So Wilhemina's story is really a story of success, of the LymFlow procedure and the LymFlow device really providing not just limb salvage, but long-term success for this individual. So Wilhemina, as I told you, could not really walk well before we did this procedure. And after we did it, not only did she get rid of her pain, but she was actually able to heal her toe. So she kept her foot completely intact except for a small area where the wound healed up on their great toe. And 2 years after I saw her initially, she wound up walking so much that she started developing chest pain and actually had to have her heart disease treated in order to keep her from having chest pain every time she tried to walk distances. And now here we are 3 to 3.5 years down the road, and it's not the leg in which she had the problems that causes her some difficulty when she starts to walk, but it's her other leg in which she has claudication that causes her trouble. So I would consider this probably, what we'd like to achieve, and one of our, great successes with this device is the ability to take someone who couldn't walk because of pain and a wound, who now walks very comfortably on this leg and is really not limited at all by that leg, but by the other leg. The other options I think that we have yet to investigate is how could deep vein arterialization with LymFlow alter the ways that we manage patients with SFA occlusions or more upstream arterial occlusions. Could improving the outflow of those interventions with what we're doing here provide an alternative means to keep those other revascularization procedures that we do open? We frequently see patients who have limited tibial outflow and a blockage above that. And what we do is we intervene on the superficial femoral artery or the common femoral artery or the iliac artery but we don't really address what's going on in the calf and foot. And it is possible that adding to the outflow through a deep vein arterialization may enhance the patency and the long-term benefits that we see in these patients.
When I first had my surgery, I had to depend on my family members. They was very supportive. They took the time to take me to the doctor, take me wherever I had to go to the grocery store, and it was a blessing. And I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine, and I haven't had any problems where I had to call Dr. Claire and for an emergency, like something hurting so bad. Never. So I'm doing fine, and they're doing fine also.
When I think about these patients, the thing that's most important to them is preservation of their limb, because that limb, that foot, allows them to walk. So when I think about them, and I think particularly about leaving no limb behind, I think it's a critical aspect of our care for these patients, that to preserve their activity level, preserve their lifestyle, and preserve their ability to maintain independence, we need to leave no limbs behind.